Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we'll be going over another one of my 6-card casual decks. This one I jokingly kind of call Democracy because it has a lot to do with voting. Even though normally when it starts off, it's a little evened out between, players and there with the voting, but as time goes by and you'll notice as I read off some cards, the votes start to get a little too stacked in my favor, and kind of feels like that's kind of accurate how democracy ends up working around here. That being said, let me just get on into this. Starting off, we have 3 copies of Tevet, Seller of Secrets. It is a 6/6 flying Ward 3 with Consul's Dilemma. Consul's Dilemma. Whenever Tevet enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, investigate. For each bribery vote, create a treasure token. While voting, you may vote an additional time. After that, we have 2 copies of Orchard Elemental. It is a 2/2 with Consul's Dilemma. Whenever Orchard Elemental enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for Sprout or Harvest. Put 2+1/+1 counters on Orchard Elemental for each Sprout vote, and you gain 3 life for each Harvest vote. Next up, we have Brago's Representative. This is a 1/4. And while voting, you get an additional vote. 2 copies of those in here. Next up, 2 copies of Ballot Broker. It is a 2/3. While voting, you may vote an additional time. Next up, we have Messenger Jays. And it's 2 copies of Messenger Jays. It's a 2/1 flying Consul's Dilemma. When Messenger Jays enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for Feather or Quill. Put +1/+1 counter on Messenger J for each Feather vote, and draw a card for each Quill vote. For each card drawn this way, discard a card. After that, we have Minister of Worth. It's a 4/4 flying Will of the Council. When Minister of Worth enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for Grace or Condemnation. Condemnation, whatever. If Grace gets more votes, each player returns to the battlefield. Each player returns each creature card from his or her graveyard to the battlefield. If Condemnation gets more votes, or the vote is tied, destroy all creatures other than Minister of Worth. 2 copies is in here. Next up, we have 2 copies of Grudge Keeper. It's a 2/1. Whenever players finish voting, each opponent who voted for a choice you didn't vote for loses 2 life. Next up, we have Uramon of the White Council. It's a 3/3 Secret Council. When Uramon of the White Council enters the battlefield, each player secretly votes for Fellowship or Aid. Then those votes are revealed. For each Fellowship vote, the voter chooses a creature they control. You gain control of each creature chosen this way, and they gain this creature can't. Each creature chosen this way, they gain this creature can't attack its owner. Then for each aid vote, put +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. We got 2 copies of those in here. Moving on to our slight singletons here. We have Círdan the Shipwright. He's a 3/4 with Vigilance, Secret Council. Whenever Círdan the Shipwright enters the battlefield or attacks, each player secretly votes for a player. Then those votes are revealed. Each player draws a card for each vote they received. Then each player who received no votes may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. After that, we have Custody Squire. It's a 3/3 flying, Will of the Council. When Custody Squire enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for an artifact, creature, or enchantment card in your graveyard. Return each card with the most votes or tied for the most votes to your hand. And we have Arister of the Council. It's a 2/4. When players finish voting, each opponent who voted for a choice you voted for creates a treasure token. You scry X, where X is the number of opponents who voted for the choice you didn't vote for, and draw a card. Moving on from there, down to our spells, we have 3 copies of Model of Unity. Whenever players finish voting, you and each opponent who voted for a choice... One second. Alright, sorry. For a choice you voted for, may scry 2. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. 4 copies of Plea for Power. Will of the Council, starting with you. Each player votes for time or knowledge. If time gets more votes, take an extra turn after this one. If knowledge gets more votes, or the vote is tied, draw 3 cards. Next up, we have 4 copies of Sail into the West. Will of the Council, starting with you. Each player votes for Return or Embark. If Return gets more votes, each player returns up to 2 cards from their graveyard to their hand. Then you exile Sail into the West. If Embark gets more votes, the vote is tied. Each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. After that, we have Path of the Animus. Reveal cards from... search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them into the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. And then we have Wheel of the Planewalkers. Starting with you, each player votes for Planeswalk or Chaos. If Planeswalk gets more votes, Planeswalk. If Chaos gets more votes or is tied, Chaos ensues. 2 copies of that. Then we got 2 copies of Promise of Loyalty. Each player puts a vow counter on creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. After that, we have 2 copies of Tyrant's Choice. Will of the Council, starting with you. Each player votes for death or torture. If death gets more votes, each opponent sacrifices a creature. If torture gets more votes, or the vote is tied, each opponent loses 4 life. Next up, we have Path of the Ghost Hunter. Create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. And Will of the Planeswalkers. Starting with you, each player votes for Planeswalker Chaos. If Planeswalk gets more votes, Planeswalk. If Chaos gets more votes, or tied for Chaos ensues. Then lastly, a single copy of Travel Through Karadhras, whatever. Secret Council, starting with you, each player votes for Redhorn Pass or Mines of Moria. For each Redhorn Pass vote, search your library for basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. If you search your library this way, shuffle. For each Mines of Moria vote, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Exile, travel through Kadrahad, whatever. Down to our lands, we have 2 swamps, 4 plains, 4 forests, 5 islands, 2 seaside citadels, which at the end of the battlefield tapped, and you can tap them for a green, white, or blue. 2 copies of Opulent Palace, where it's the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it for a black, green, or blue. And 1 copy of Arcane Sanctum, it's the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it for a white, blue, or black. And with that, that brings this little exploration of this deck to a close. I hope y'all enjoyed checking out this deck with me. And thank y'all for joining me, and see you in the next one.